Hey friend, Chris Vandeviver here from WhyLogicProRules.com, the website that helps you get the most you can out of Apple's Logic Pro 10. Today in our 30-day series, I want to dig into Amp Designer and Pedalboard and just point out a couple of key features about each, which just offers so much versatility for guitar players in terms of tone and speaker and amps. But I wouldn't just think about these for just guitar players, but also just about any style of instrument if you're looking for sound design options. I mean, think electric keys, think Mellotron. I mean, these instruments would be played through pedals, through an amp. So it's not just for guitar players, though we're going to hone in on guitar tracks in this video. And I want to show you just a rough overview of what these are, but also some ways that you can get a little more out of these tools. Before we dig into Amp Designer, I just want to bring to your attention that it's not actually the first amp plugin in Logic. You can see it in my channel strip here, but if we go to the audio effects in the channel strip and hold Option and click, there's actually a hidden menu of legacy plugins for you to use. These are plugins that have been retired from Logic's portfolio, but are still there just for backwards compatibility's sake. And right here, we have Guitar Amp Pro. And this takes us to a different time and place in Logic's history. We're not going to dig into it, but I just want to bring it to your attention in case you're looking for a little more tonal options or just want to compare it against Amp Designer. I have a riff here, and let's take a quick listen to what I have going on here. Pay special attention to the guitar sounds, and then we'll dig into Amp Designer and Pedalboard. Here we go. This is how I normally pick together a guitar patch. I'll start with the library, and if we just select some of the tracks, you can see I'm using the tremolo tweeter. Just something that caught my ear. It's like, yeah, that's what I'm after for this riff, and then I fine tune from there. But honestly, any approach works just as well. I just like to start with a preset. So let's hone in on the guitar here, the drums, the bass, and we'll pan this guitar to the center. And let's open Amp Designer. I'm sure it needs no introduction, but obviously Amp Designer emulates the sound of guitar amps, guitar cabinets, even microphone modeling, and it gives us a whole slew of tonal options. We have 3 drop-down menus to choose from when we're picking out the model of amp we want to work with. We can either choose the entire stack, so it would be both the amp head and the cabinet. If we select, we get the matching 2, or we can select just the amp head, ranging from a transparent preamp to something that looks like, a Fender amp, to what looks like Marshall amp heads, orange, and maybe some stuff that we don't recognize. Additionally, the cabinet, we can choose anything from a direct out, which I would be careful with if you're working with high gain guitars, to 1x8s, which are very cute, 1x12s, 4x12s. There's so much available to us. And then the mic options range from what looks like a Neumann U87, AKG 414, the classic 57, even ribbon microphones. And as you could probably tell, the face of each amp head is identical across the different models. I'm sure some purists would prefer that the different amp heads were exactly the same as the amps they're modeling, but I think this is kind of helpful that they're exactly the same in terms of gain, EQ, reverb, all the knobs are the same, and you're just flipping through the different tones of the different amp heads, but keeping the same settings. So let's play around with picking different amp heads, different cabinets, different microphones so we can get a sense for what's available. We'll play this and I'll start with the amp heads. Check it out. Pretty cool. And then we go from here. Let's pick some different cabinets, try them out. Cool. And then let's play around with the microphones. And if you hover your mouse right over the speaker here, you get a top-down view of the speaker and where the microphone is in relation to the speaker. So you can move the microphone both forward and backwards, so closer to the amp, further away, and either center or off center. So check it out. As you can see, so much tonal variety for you to use. But I'd like to bring your attention to some other ideas if you like to use Amp Designer. Number one, I'm not sure if a lot of people know, but the different EQ options and reverb options contained within the amp heads themselves. For example, if you hover your mouse over the heading of the EQ section, there's a drop down. If you click on it, we have 5 different types of EQ. So each amp head has its own tonality, and they fall into one of these 5 buckets when it comes to the EQ section. And you can mix and match. So you can pick the small tweed amp head, but not use its original EQ profile. So we have British Bright, Vintage, US Classic, Modern, and Boutique. Let's take a listen and flip through these different options for EQ. Take a listen. Additionally, the reverb section has a lot of reverb, mostly springs, but some other reverbs as well. Let's take a listen to this. So I'm gonna turn off the reverb that I have for this guitar, turn this one on, turn it way up so we can hear it, and we'll just start flipping through. And if that wasn't enough, we also have effects for each guitar amp head. They're the same across the board, and there's no other options, but you can choose between tremolo or vibrato. And you can either sync it to the tempo of the project, or you can have it just running free. And in my pedalboard instance, I actually have some tremolo, so I'm going to turn it off just so we can hear what's going on with the amp head. And I'll set this to a depth of 100%, and let's start hearing this. So I'm going to switch between the tremolo and the vibrato, run around with it. Here we go. Cool, so a lot of tonal variety. One thing that I always wish for Amp Designer that it doesn't come included, but we can actually program is I personally don't love diving into each of these menus all the time. I actually prefer that there was just a dial that you could just turn, even on a controller, just like turn and you flip through the different amp heads, the different cabinet models. And though it's not included in Amp Designer, we can actually set it up ourselves. So I'm going to open the smart controls using key command B, or we can use this button right here. And check it out. If we open the inspector in the smart controls, and the smart controls allow us like an easier way of interacting with the plugins and with the instruments on a channel strip. Instead of opening each of the plugins, you can just have specific controls mapped to a smart control and then just adjust them from this easy menu. Now, if I select one of these options, so we'll select the echo, we can see here tape delay feedback. And if we select from this drop-down menu here, there's a non-automatable section here. And under amp, we could choose to have some of these controls map to the amp model or the entire stack or the speaker model. So let's set this to the amp, select the room reverb here from the drop-down non-automatable, under amp, models, speaker, and let's now close the inspector. Cool, so check it out. If I open Amp Designer and I start turning these knobs, we're gonna start flipping through the different amps. which is so awesome. If you are looking for something like this, I would map out these smart controls how you prefer them and create a patch so you can load this up every time you're plugging in your guitar. You're going to work with Amp Designer and Pedalboard. Okay, so let's now dig into Pedalboard. And this isn't going to be nearly as in-depth, but Pedalboard, has a slew of pedals for you to use. And they range from distortion, which we have a ton of, to things like delay. We have pitch and modulation. We have dynamics, utility. And there's just so much tonal options within this. I like to think of Pedalboard as my virtual rack of analog gear because it's not just for guitar. And I love them because they're a little more approachable and they sound great. So if you're looking for a compressor that's a little less intense than the Logic compressor, try the Squash compressor here. It has sustain, it has level, and 2 options for attack. Same thing with the delays and the reverb in Pedalboard. They actually sound quite good. The True Tape delay, tie-dye delay, the Springbox reverb, and I'll very often reach for one of these tremolo pedals instead of the tremolo plugin in the modulation section of the Logic plugin folder. But I would really want to bring your attention to these 2 plugins right here, which are the splitter and the mixer. And these are utility plugins. Now, I have my tone all set up here, so let's get rid of some of these plugins. We'll introduce Pedalboard, and we're going to introduce it as a stereo plugin. So I got to just hold Option, click, go into Pedalboard, stereo, and now we have a stereo instance of Pedalboard. And I'm going to bring in a simple delay, so Blue Echo, and I'm going to bring in the mixer and the splitter. Now, the splitter always has to be before a pedal, and the mixer comes tied to the splitter. And what this allows us to do is create 2 separate channels of pedals. So they work in parallel. We have an A or a B, or we can split it by frequency. So anything above 500 hertz or 50 or 5K, anything in between is going to be affected by one set of pedals, and anything below is affected by another. We'll set this to split. And with the mixer, because we have a stereo instance, we can actually choose, do you want more of the A side of the pedals or more of the B? So either this side or this side. And you can even pan the pedals to the left or to the right. Or you can choose to focus on A or the B side. So to make this easy on us, I'm going to select a different plugin for the other side. So I don't know, we'll pick this phaser plugin. And if you click on the tab here, it flips which side the pedal lives on. We'll set this to sync. And we'll just really hone in on this guitar track so we can hear what's going on. So check it out. Let's take a listen. It's probably going to sound crazy, but here we go. So the phaser is living on the B side of this routing, and the echo is living on the A side. So we can actually choose, do we want more phaser or less? We can even adjust the panning if it feels a little too far out to the left and right. And what I like to do is create stereo delay effects with this. So check it out. If we bring in the True Tape delay, and let's just get rid of the roto phase here. So if we just click and drag it out, we can trash it, flip this around. So right now we're synced to the tempo. If we look at the time, so we'll set this to like an 1/8 note delay, and we'll set this time to an 1/8 note delay. And let's just check it out. I'll set the mix to about 50%. Here we go. It's really so fantastic. I really think you got to examine these plugins. You got to give them a try because there's so much versatility involved and can work great in your songs. So I hope that was helpful for you. If it was, as always, I highly recommend subscribing to the YouTube channel, Why Logic Pro Rules, or subscribing on the website itself, whylogicprorules.com. Every week, I'm posting new videos, emails, and posts to help you get the most you can out of Apple's Logic Pro 10. Thanks so much, and I'll see you tomorrow in this series.